Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take a complex subject, really break it down, and give you the insights you need, without all the noise.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You're here to get to the heart of things, and today, well, we're tackling something many of us do without even realizing it.
that's right. We are diving into overgeneralization. It's a common thinking pattern, almost like a mental shortcut that can, well, kind of backfire.
It really can. And we've pulled together insights from various mental health resources. We're looking at, what it is, how it pops up, the effects it has.
And importantly, what we can actually do about it. So, the mission today: understand overgeneralization, maybe see if it's playing a role in your own life, and get some practical tools to think more clearly, maybe feel a bit less anxious.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, so let's get right into it. What is overgeneralization, fundamentally?
Okay, so, put simply, it's when we experience something, usually just one single thing, often negative,
Right, one event.
and we draw this huge, broad conclusion from it. We basically decide that this one event is proof it'll always be this way in similar situations.
Okay. So one bad date means all dates will be bad.
That kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah.
The American Psychological Association actually defines it as seeing a single negative event as, like, an invariable rule, predicting endless defeat or failure.
Endless defeat. Wow, that sounds heavy.
It can feel that way.
Yeah.
And a key thing to listen for in your own thoughts are those absolute words,
Like?
like always or never. They turn that one single event into some kind of universal truth.
Okay, that makes sense. Can you give us maybe a really simple everyday example just to make it super clear?
Sure. Think about driving. You hit maybe 3 red lights in a row,
Ugh, happens all the time.
right? And you think, I always get stuck at red lights. That's it, taking a couple of instances and making it an absolute.
Okay, yeah, I definitely do that with traffic. But you mentioned our sources talk about it becoming a cognitive distortion. What's the shift there? When does it go from just an annoying thought about traffic to something more?
Well, the difference is when it becomes a consistent pattern of interpreting negative things this way. It's
Okay.
not just a one-off thought about red lights. It's applying that same logic to bigger things in life.
Hmm.
A setback isn't just a setback. It becomes proof that things will always go wrong in that area or that you're always going to fail.
So it gets internalized much more deeply.
Exactly. And it can really magnify negative feelings. Someone dealing with something like depression might already have a bit of a negativity bias, and overgeneralization just feeds right into that, making it worse.
And those words again, always, never, everybody, nobody. Our sources really flag those. Why are they such giveaways?
Because they leave no room for nuance. They're black and white. If you think I never get things right, you're completely dismissing any time you actually did succeed. It just wipes the slate clean of any positive evidence.
It's like putting blinders on, only seeing the negative confirmation.
Pretty much.
Oh.
You take this tiny snapshot of failure and blow it up into this giant, unchanging picture.
Okay, I think I'm getting a clearer picture. Let's make it even more concrete. Our sources had quite a few examples. What are some common ways this shows up?
Oh yeah, loads of examples. A really common one is after a relationship ends, the thought might be, I'll never find anyone else. I'll be alone forever.
Oh, yeah, that's a tough one. Taking one painful ending and forecasting it onto the entire future.
Exactly. Or maybe at work. Your boss gives you some feedback on one part of a project, maybe points out an error.
Constructive criticism, hopefully.
Right, but the overgeneralizing thought could be, I'm always screwing up, I'm just bad at this job.
Hmm.
One specific critique becomes a judgment on your entire competence.
Wow. Yeah, that could really knock your confidence down.
Totally. Or think about school. You get one bad grade on a test, and immediately it's, I'm never going to pass this class. I'm just not smart enough. It ignores all the other tests, all the studying, everything else.
Just focuses on that one score.
Mm-hmm. Or say you're in a social setting, maybe meeting new people, and you fumble your words a bit.
We've all been there.
Right. But the thought is, oh God, I always make a fool of myself. I'm so awkward. One slightly clumsy moment becomes proof of permanent social failure.
It's kind of amazing how fast the brain makes that leap.
It really is. Other things mentioned were like getting turned down for one job application leading to I'll never find a job.
Okay.
Or trying to learn knitting. You drop one stitch and it's forget it. I'll never learn how to do this.
Even small hobbies aren't safe.
Apparently not.
Yeah.
Even something like asking someone to dance and they say no, the thought could become nobody would ever want to dance with me.
Wow. It really seems to latch onto rejection or failure, however small.
It does. There were even examples like getting motion sick on a train once leading to I can never take a train again. Or feeling really anxious the first time your partner travels for work and then assuming you'll be an absolute wreck every single time they leave from now on.
So it's this pattern of taking one negative data point and just stretching it over everything, making it the rule.
That's the essence of it. Blowing it way out of proportion,
Yeah.
creating these big negative beliefs about yourself or what's going to happen.
Okay. So who tends to fall into this pattern more often? And what's the actual like day-to-day impact of thinking this way?
Well, the sources suggest that people dealing with certain things like uh, social anxiety, generalized anxiety, depression, PTSD, they might be more prone to it.
Which makes sense, right? If you're already feeling anxious or down, you might be more likely to interpret things negatively.
Exactly. There's often an existing tendency towards negative interpretations that overgeneralization can latch onto and amplify. And the impact, well, it really fuels negative self-talk. That inner critic gets louder.
Leading to feeling like you can't do anything right.
Precisely. And that has knock-on effects. Your motivation can drop.
Right.
I mean, why try if you're convinced you'll always fail?
Right. Seems pointless.
Yeah. It chips away at self-confidence, definitely increases anxiety, and just generally messes with your self-image. You might start feeling like people don't like you or that you're just not capable.
It sounds like it can become a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It really can. One source even called it self-limiting overgeneralization. The thoughts themselves stop you from even trying things, from reaching your potential, because you've already decided the outcome will be negative.
Wow. That's powerful.
And interestingly, there was also a link mentioned between using that kind of always-never language and experiencing and expressing anger more intensely, even destructively.
Huh. I hadn't thought of that connection, but I guess if you feel constantly trapped by these always situations, frustration would build up.
Makes sense, right? And you see it in specific conditions, too. Like with PTSD, the fear from the original trauma can get overgeneralized onto situations that are actually safe, leading to a lot of avoidance.
Okay.
With depression, it can really deepen feelings of hopelessness. If you believe negative things always happen to you, it just reinforces that depressive cycle.
And anxiety.
With anxiety, especially social anxiety, one awkward conversation can spiral into believing you're terrible in all social situations, which just makes you more anxious about the next one. So yeah, it's common. Certain people might be more vulnerable, and the cost to well-being is pretty significant.
Okay, this is incredibly helpful for understanding the what and the why. I'm sure a lot of listeners are hearing echoes of their own thoughts here. So let's shift to the how. How do we push back against this? Our sources had a lot of strategies. Where do we even start?
The starting point across the board in our sources is awareness, just noticing when it's happening.
Sounds simple, but probably isn't easy.
It takes practice. But consciously catching yourself in those always, never, everything moments is the first critical step. One really practical tool mentioned is keeping a thought journal.
Like writing down the thought when you notice it?
Exactly. Jotting down the situation, the thought, especially those overgeneralized ones. It helps you see the patterns, identify your triggers. It makes the thoughts less automatic, more something you can actually look at.
Okay, so catch it, maybe write it down. What's next?
Challenge it. Actively question the thought. Ask yourself, okay, wait, is this really true?
Like fact-checking your own brain.
Kind of. Look for the actual evidence. Does the evidence really support this huge, sweeping, negative conclusion? Or is the evidence maybe a bit shaky or limited to just that one instance?
So putting on your detective hat.
Yeah, I like that. Be a detective for your thoughts. Focus on the facts, not just the feeling the thought generates. Another really good technique is to actively look for exceptions. Yeah. So if the thought is, I never managed to finish projects on time, deliberately search your memory for times you did finish on time, or times things went okay.
So countering the negative with concrete positives.
Exactly. Our brains often spotlight the negative, so we have to consciously steer towards the counter evidence. It helps break that absolute never.
Okay, that makes sense. What else? Mindfulness came up.
Right. Mindfulness helps you observe your thoughts without immediately buying into them or judging them. You can notice an overgeneralizing thought arise. Acknowledge it, there's that always thought again, but not get totally swept away by it. It creates a little distance.
A bit of breathing room between you and the thought.
Precisely. And then there's reframing, which was a big one.
How does that work?
It's about consciously swapping out that harsh, absolute statement for something more balanced, more realistic, maybe more compassionate.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Instead of, I always say the wrong thing, you could reframe it as, okay, I felt awkward in that conversation, and I can try a different approach next time. Or, I made a mistake this time, and I can learn from it,
Yep.
instead of, I always make mistakes.
So it acknowledges the difficulty but doesn't make it a permanent state of being, allows for growth.
Exactly. Much more constructive, less self-attacking. There was also a cool practical tip about quantifying things.
Quantifying, like using numbers.
Sort of.
Yep.
Instead of thinking this is a huge disaster, try to be more specific. How much of a disaster, really? What's the actual evidence? One source suggested a 3-column exercise: evidence for the negative thought, evidence against it, and then based on that, write a more balanced alternative thought.
Ooh, I like that. Very structured.
It can be really helpful. And tying back to what we said earlier, consciously avoiding those absolute words is key.
Catching the always, never, everybody, nobody.
Yes. And deliberately replacing them. Instead of never, try rarely or sometimes. Instead of everybody, maybe some people or this person.
Softening the language.
Yeah, it turns down the intensity. Reality testing is another strategy, checking if your thoughts align with the actual facts, not just your feelings. Cognitive restructuring is related, kind of a deeper dive.
How so?
You really interrogate those strong negative thoughts. Ask, am I 100% sure this is true? Is there any other way to view this situation? Maybe consider, how would someone else see this? Or recalling past successes that contradict the negative thought.
So really cross-examining the thought.
Pretty much. Building a case against its absolute certainty. Sometimes just stepping back helps too, thinking, what advice would I give a friend if they were thinking this? Often we're kinder to friends than ourselves.
That's definitely true.
Also, checking in with your emotions. Am I thinking this way because I'm feeling really anxious or down right now? Recognizing that feelings can color our thoughts is important.
Okay, so acknowledging the emotional influence.
And actively collecting your own evidence against the thought in daily life. Like the red light example, if you think you always get red lights, actually start noticing and counting the green ones. Make a mental note or even write it down.
Gathering real-world data.
Exactly. Getting feedback from others you trust can also provide a reality check. They might see things more objectively.
A different perspective.
Yeah. And focusing on the present helps. Overgeneralization often involves dwelling on past failures or worrying about future ones. Staying grounded in the here and now can interrupt that. Setting realistic expectations is also helpful.
How so?
Well, if your goals are impossibly high, you might set yourself up for perceived failures, which then feed the overgeneralization. So setting achievable goals is better. And underlying a lot of this is self-compassion.
Being kinder to yourself.
Yeah. Treating yourself with understanding when you do make a mistake instead of jumping to, I always mess up. And finally, positive affirmations can be used to deliberately counter the negative self-talk.
Wow, that's a really solid toolkit. Lots of different angles to approach it from. And our sources also touched on CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. How does ours fit in?
CBT is basically designed for this kind of work. It's a type of therapy focused specifically on identifying and changing unhelpful thought patterns, and overgeneralization is a classic example.
So therapists use these techniques.
Yes, therapists use tools like thought records, similar to the journal idea, and cognitive restructuring exercises in a structured way. They help you dig into your specific patterns, understand where they come from, and systematically challenge and change them.
So it offers more personalized guidance and support.
Exactly. If these patterns feel really dug in or overwhelming, working with the CBT therapist can provide that expert support to navigate it effectively.
That makes a lot of sense. This has been incredibly illuminating. So if we boil it down, the big takeaway is that overgeneralization is this common mental habit, maybe a bit of a glitch,
Yeah, glitch is a good way to put it.
where we take one negative event and wrongly make it a universal rule, often using those always or never statements.
That's the heart of it. And we've seen how this thinking habit can really impact mood, anxiety, self-esteem, just how we feel day to day.
But the really hopeful message from all our sources is that this isn't set in stone. It can be changed.
Absolutely. It starts with awareness, and then consistently applying these kinds of cognitive tools and strategies we discussed. It takes practice, for sure.
It won't change overnight.
No, probably not. But you can definitely learn to catch those thoughts, question them, and develop a more balanced, realistic perspective over time.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you, our listener, to take away from this deep dive. Think about one area in your life, just one, where you might find yourself using always or never. Maybe about work, relationships, even a hobby. Now, can you find just one small piece of evidence, one tiny exception that contradicts that absolute statement? Just one instance where the always or never wasn't actually true.
It's a great starting point for challenging those thoughts.
It is, just a little something to chew on. And, if this topic really hit home for you and you want to explore it further, maybe look into resources on CBT or consider talking with a mental health professional. They can offer that personalized support to help shift these patterns.
Definitely worth considering if it feels like a struggle.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive today.